Hi, I'm the 13th Wolfman, and this is part 2 of a series I started a while back ago called The Evolution of Evil. I left off with the 1940s, and now we're into the 1950s. And in the 1950s, the evil took a new face. We still had crazy mad scientists, but now because of Dr. Oppenheimer, who created the atomic bomb, or helped create the atomic bomb, and is quoted as saying, let's see if I can get the quote right, "I have become death, the destroyer of worlds." Because of that, the new evil in the cinema of horror was atomic. A lot of people didn't understand what was going to happen. They knew that they created the atomic bomb. They knew what the atomic bomb could do, but they didn't know what the fallout could cause. So Hollywood jumped on it. Horror films now became atomic age horror sci-fi films. You know, and there was always that doctor in these films that was doing what he can to help people survive, but there was always a fallout because he introduced radioactive material or some kind of element that no one knew existed, you know, nucleode 438 or something like that, and it had a side effect. Well, side effects for the majority of the time was that it would help things grow big, like tarantula and them, you know. And then you also had other giant movies like the Giant Behemoth, the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, and the Thing from Another World, which didn't really have a lot to do with the nuclear terror, but they thought, well, hey, things are big, let's have everything big. And that was a really cool way to go. Scientists in the 1950s in horror films were really cool because, like I said, they weren't really trying to hurt people. In 1958, we got The Fly, and the scientist was basically trying to create teleportation. And as you all know, the fly gets in with the, gets in with the man as he teleports, and his body becomes scrambled. Head of a fly, body of a man. So because he's got the head of a fly, he doesn't have the brain power of the man to understand what's going on, or communicate what's going on, for that matter. And that was in 1958, but if you watch like from the early 50s to the mid 50s, it's all pseudoscience, fringe science, atomic age science type stuff. And then evil takes another turn in the mid to late 50s. Americans get introduced to Hammer. That's right. The new evil is the old evil all over again. Hammer said, hey, Universal could do it, we could do it just as good. If not, we'll try to do it a little bit better. They redid Dracula and Frankenstein with 2 different names. And the Americans are introduced to British horror. This would be the first wave in what is to come with Euro horror. I mean, all of a sudden, all these monsters and these ghouls and, Frankenstein and Dracula, they're in color. Vivid color. And they got different actors. And Christopher Lee looks very gaunt looking because he's got the long face, unlike the round face that Bela Lugosi had, And he's very skinny, and Bela Lugosi had more of like an acrobatic body, where he kind of had a upper torso, but kind of framed down a little bit, where Christopher Lee was just very, very skinny. Kind of had a swimmer's body, I guess is what you'd say, just, a pipe. And it was a whole different look. And then they did Frankenstein, and and they always changed the name, which was really cool. It was the horror of Dracula. Frankenstein's Revenge, stuff like that. And their look for Frankenstein, see, since Universal owned the flat lid, and the brow, because of a trademark, that's the word I'm looking for. They couldn't do that. They could make him look sickly and ghastly, but they had to come up with their own look. So they came up with the complete opposite, you know. And it looked cool. And again, it's in color. Who thought we would get to see Dracula and Frankenstein and the Wolfman, you know, their version of the Wolfman in color. So this is the 1950s, and still, horror is just in its early stages. It's been 20 years since we've seen Universal pump out the first Dracula and Frankenstein, but it's still a young infant, and we don't really get to see what happens with the horror until the 1960s, and that's where I will pick you up for part 3 of the evil of evolution. I am the 13th Wolfman, and I'm on the prowl.